That was really great. Christina Figueres was an excellent speaker. And what's next? We still have Mark. Are you there?
And
There you are. Okay. I wasn't sure if that was the picture. You were so still, or it looks your picture and you look incredibly the same, which is good. Would you like to maybe begin a little bit early, or
Sure.
perhaps maybe?
Yes.
we,
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's an honor to come right after Christina Figueres, and please don't hold me to her standard of brilliance in speaking. But happy Earth Day to one and all. Happy 5th anniversary Earth Day. I'm gonna have more to say about that in a minute, but really thanks to everyone from Democrats abroad and others participating around the world, to Angela and Ann for organizing this, to Julia for leadership, for Roz and Kathy for connecting me, and it's a pleasure. And I wanted to, I know, and I appreciate being given a lot of time. So I even have a presentation that we'll get to. But what I wanted to do today is focus on one particular challenge of the environmental sustainability movement that I've been involved in and working on from the very beginning, 50 years ago of Earth Day. I actually, as a 19-year-old student and activist at Stanford University, participated in the first Earth Day 50 years ago. So it's something to reminisce about. And it was the beginning of a change in my life, because I wanted to say, and this is what this challenge is about. I guess if you want to put a way of characterizing it, would be the economic resistance to being sustainable, which has been a challenge from the very beginning. But once we get into the period of the threat of climate change, of catastrophic climate change, it's become just a horrendous barrier to us doing the right thing. And so that's what I've worked on and I want to talk about. And just to say that, I was born in 1950 in Chicago, which was then one of the biggest, most modern industrialized cities in the world. People came from everywhere. I myself grew up among children and grandchildren of immigrants who came from Europe, from all over the world, from all over the US, for better jobs, or to start a business, or to have a decent livelihood for themselves and their families. And so I was passionate about civil rights. I worked in the poverty program when I was in high school. I was a member of a labor union since I was 15, the Building Service Employees International, which is now SEIU, and always was very conscious of how vital it is for people to be able to provide for themselves and their loved ones, and why economic development was so key to everything we were doing if we wanted to have a more inclusive, more equitable opportunity society. So as I got, as we headed to 67 and 68, and I got very involved in trying to end the Vietnam War. But as far as the environment goes, while I was a liberal Democrat, I supported the basic things. I was never that concerned about it, because in the Chicago mindset that I grew up in, which is very typical of lots of people everywhere, bad environment was good economics. In other words, it was generally thought of that, well, some pollution in some ways was okay if that was, creating more and better jobs. And so that kind of hit me in the face when I started to take the environmental movement more seriously. Because it turned out that was the barrier that, we had. I could say in 1974, there was this enormous statewide ballot initiative in California called Proposition 9. That was maybe the best comprehensive environmental initiative any state had ever done. And when it was first put on the ballot, it was ahead in the polls. By election day, it lost. And this is where you could see always this argument that the business opposition and other opposition would put forward. They would say, well, okay, clean air is nice, but which would you rather have? Clean air or a job? Clean water is nice, but which would you rather have? Clean water or be able to feed your family? And if people thought that was the choice that they had, that's where we would lose. So I kind of dedicated myself, beginning in the 1970s in California, that we have to change the whole mindset that I grew up in. We have to basically be able to say, if you want a job, you must have clean air. If you want to feed your family, you must have clean water. In other words, good environment is good economics. And so I'm going to give, I have a kind of first a kind of a history of how that evolved from California in the 1970s. Then talk about current work that GUD has been doing around a big, what we hope will be a global initiative called Sustainable Innovation Zones, starting here in Porto Alegre, Brazil, where I'm speaking to you from. And that's actually, even though this is a picture you're looking at behind me, it comes right out our window from the largest park in the city where we live. So it is a very beautiful green place still. And, but then I want to talk about, which Christina Figueres talked about a little bit, about coronavirus. Because even though it's a disaster and very dangerous, that's why we're all having this virtual meetings and staying at home, it actually has opened the opportunity in a way that we never had before to having a stronger economic argument on our side. So that's the good news. So, you know, stay for the surprise ending punchline and we can talk about it. But so with that, I guess we can, you know, I am a professor. I hope it's okay to have slides and we'll do a kind of a lecture here. So if you want to go ahead, get that started.
Oh, thank you so much. And for everyone who's just recently joined us, Dr. Marc Weiss is chairman and CEO of Global Urban Development, which is an international policy organization and professional network of over 700 leaders and experts in 60 plus countries. We're really pleased to have him here, and we're going to start his slides right now.
Okay. Here we go. All right. Okay, so this is just the cover slide, so you can take a look at that, and the title of the talk, Climate Action, Sustainable Innovation Zones, and Inclusive Prosperity. Next. So I want to say a little bit about global urban development. It's a very crazy project that began 19 years ago in right after 9/11. In 2001, and we were concerned that the world was really going in the wrong direction. So we had this vision of building this big global network of leaders and experts of like-minded people to try over 30 years. It was a 30-year strategy. So by 2030, the world would be going in the right direction. And there were kind of four things we were focusing on. One was the rise of urbanization and urban regional development. That's where the name comes from, that we'd become an urban world that still had an anti-urban mentality and needed to shift to embrace the future. And then we also focused on kind of this economic development approach that had based on innovation, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And there were two parts to our work. One is what we called, so we said our overall goal is for all people everywhere in the world to live and to thrive in peace with each other and in peace with nature. Time to end the war with nature while we still can, because you know, we're part of nature. We're not going to win a war. We only win a peace, an accommodation. So there were two parts to the approach. The first we called the paradigm shift, trying to get people to think differently. And there we worked on a high level and many international coalitions with success in that now you have, it's beginning 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Climate Agreement, the UN New Urban Agenda, things that would have been unthinkable in 2001 when we started. So there has been a lot of progress on the paradigm shift. We have a long way to go. And then the second part of GUD is what we call the positive path forward. If people think differently, they should be acting differently, and we want to help them. So we've done lots of projects on the ground as a kind of a nonprofit NGO consultants, working with governments, with businesses, with communities. And the most recent project, the Sustainable Innovation Zones, I will talk about. But you can see on the web link on the bottom, the leapfrog economic strategy that was funded by the World Bank for Rio Grande do Sul, the state where Porto Alegre is the capital, to become the most sustainable and innovative place in Latin America by 2030. And that was where what gave birth to the Sustainable Innovation Zones. The next slide, please. And then you see now we have a new website dedicated to the globalurban.net, the beginnings of this movement. And you can see it's all about Sustainable Innovation Zones. On the left, it's about Porto Alegre. In the middle, about two other zones that now exist, one in Panama City called ACTA, one in Santo Angelo, another city here in the south of Brazil called Zissan. And then we have three that are beginning to being organized in London, in Toronto, and in New York City, in Brooklyn. Next. So please be sure to visit all that. There's a lot of interesting free downloadable stuff. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about this later, but here's a kind of a combined slide that shows you the leapfrog strategy, the map of ZISPOA, the Zona de Inovação Sustentável de Porto Alegre, the 6 elements, and a couple of our projects that we built, a solar electric car charging station and solar trees. Next. So just to say, metropolitan this movement, I'm going to go all the way back to the 70s, but and particularly focus on the sustainability aspect of it. It culminated as a piece of work, you know, when I was a professor at Columbia University, and I had the honor of being a policy advisor and spokesman for Bill Clinton when he ran for president in 1992, and lucky for all of us, he won, even though it was a long shot. And one of many things I did in the Clinton administration at Housing and Urban Development at HUD was develop this metropolitan economic strategy idea as a national policy. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned before, it focused on urban regions, metropolitan areas, as trying to unify them to work together as the building blocks of the local and global economies, on innovation, sustainability, and inclusiveness, what we now call sustainable innovation and inclusive prosperity. And on two key things. One is, as the overall approach, building from strength, investing in the fundamental assets that make people more productive and places more valuable, and generating dynamism, promoting modern industry networks or clusters that accelerate patient innovation and growth based on the fundamental assets. And here's the important thing: having a good environment is a fundamental asset. You know, being inclusive is a fundamental asset. So anything, it's in the eye of the beholder, but anything can be a fundamental asset if it strengthens your people and your place in how they choose to live and work. And that's how the economy grows around that. Next, please. So as I mentioned, Henry Cisneros, who was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, we developed this together. Then I actually continued it under the next secretary, Andrew Cuomo, who is now the governor of New York. So we came out with it in 1995 and 1996, 1997 was the centerpiece of this. Please, next. We didn't just come out with it as a big national report with case studies about all of the US, but we applied it first in metropolitan Baltimore in 1997, and the next. And then beginning at the end of 1997 through into 1999, in Washington, D.C., I coordinated an economic plan for the city that was mandated by the President of Congress. That was a very big success. It turned around a very troubled situation, and still doing a lot of good. I'm very proud of it. Next. And that even included many neighborhood initiatives. One that is kind of now famous around the world, the NOMA, north of Massachusetts Avenue, which we stole the idea from Soho, south of Houston in New York. And that took a very derelict area around the train station where nobody lived, just mostly vacant land and abandoned buildings, and made it transit-oriented, sustainable development, and a big success. Next, including building a new metro station that is now, even though we made up the name, NOMA in 1998, then it was originally the New York Avenue station. Now it's even called the NOMA station. Next. This article, as I was going to now go ahead back into California in the 70s, this article was published in 2015, not that old, tells the story very well of how we developed these ideas, including the sustainable economic development, sustainable innovation idea, and then have applied it all the way through to the work of global urban development, of which Peter Hall, who's since passed away, was the co-founder and vice chair. In addition, and I don't have a slide for this, but one of the best overall descriptions of metropolitan economic strategy was a report by the National Governors Association in the US 2002 that I wrote, how to apply it at the state level. And it's called State Policy Approaches to Promote Metropolitan Economic Strategy, and I recommend that. Next. So here we are. We've come a long way from over 50 years to have the Sustainable Development Goals, including the urban goal, Goal 11. That was a big focus of GUD and the coalitions we were part of. Next. And here we have, are facing these incredible challenges. This work came out of the Stockholm Resilience Center by Johan Rockström. Now he's the head of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Berlin, and which shows the dangers we're in by not living in peace and harmony with nature and the global ecosystems. And next slide, where it shows there are these 9 planetary boundaries that we must not cross. Climate change is only one of them, and some of them we've already crossed, and some of them we're very close to crossing. So we need a whole mindset shift to really thrive and be healthy and peaceful in the future in a sustainable world. Next. This book will, make sure you're in the right spirit before you read it, which incredibly documents, it was published last year, documents what will happen, some of which is already happening as we go warmer and warmer, beyond 2 degrees. And so this is the thing about climate change. We've known since the 1980s how urgent it is to avoid it. And we keep learning more every day why we need to do it. And so the big question is why we're still not. Next. The Pope even weighed in on this in a fantastic encyclical. One of the people who advised him is Hans Joachim Schellen, who I mentioned earlier was the founding director of the Potsdam Institute PIC, and he's a part of this GUD network, somebody I really admire. Next. And here's the thing about climate change is that not only do we know what the problem is, it's very simple, we know what the solutions are. And there's not just one solution. There are hundreds, even thousands of them, and they all work. You know, here's an example, just 2 books I got to pick among many, many. This Climate of Hope that was done by Carl Pope, the former head of Sierra Club, and Michael Bloomberg in his capacity as the UN Global Ambassador on Climate Change, and the book Drawdown by Paul Hawken and lots of other people that show, you know, many, 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 many different, simple, easy, important things that we can do to solve this problem, all of which work if you do them. Next. And here's like the most amazing part of all of it, because this slide, which comes from McKinsey, goes back more than a decade, where they were tasked with looking at all the possible solutions, the major ones, there are thousands of others, major ones to deal with reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And it's the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is cost. And this is the most amazing thing, you know, to let this sink into your brain, that all of the things on the left-hand side, which means those are things that can definitely be done right away or very soon, they're all below the line of zero. And in fact, McKinsey had invented a new word. They called it negative costs, meaning it doesn't cost you money, it saves you money. It saves trillions of dollars, as Christina Figueres mentioned, energy efficiency. So we even know that not only do we know what to do, but if we do it, it doesn't cost a lot. It saves a massive amount by definition, because if you're conserving and reusing natural resources, especially renewable resources, much more efficiently, that's less, not more. That costs you less, not more. Next. We call it green savings, by the way. So knowing, you know, by the way, McKinsey had also shown that just in business alone, if people did very simple things to increase energy and resource efficiency, that would save literally trillions of dollars. Okay, so we've known all this, and then think of the, you know, when things finally started getting organized in the late 80s, that led to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in '88, that led to the big Rio Summit in 1992, that led to the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. And the basic agreement of Kyoto Protocol was that we needed to get 20% below 1990 levels. In that case by 2012, when it was supposed to be renewed. And instead, what's happened since then? Emissions have increased by more than 40% above 1990 levels. So global emissions, this is just CO2, but we're 40% in the wrong direction in the time that we've known, which is the right direction we need to go in. Next. So then you have to ask the big question, and this is Albert Einstein gives the answer. Why are we not doing what we need to do to save ourselves, you know, and future generations of people, of animals, of plants, of all living things? Why not? And Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And so what is the level of consciousness that created the problem? That level of consciousness is, since the Industrial Revolution, the way when we discovered that you could burn coal to generate power to run machines, we have been essentially increasing our standard of living by overusing and wasting natural resources, by abusing and exploiting the natural environment and ecosystems. So people basically understand that, you know, most of the world has not gotten richer, but the part that did, which is a pretty big part, got richer by becoming brown. And so then so if that's the level of consciousness, which is the one that I grew up in Chicago, and you say to people, all right, we need to protect the environment, improve the quality of the environment. They have one of these two thoughts. If they're already relatively well off, they think that could make me poor. And if they're still poor, like most of the world is, they think, well, I may never be better off that way. So the barrier to doing the right thing is what I call economic fear. People are afraid to change because they think that'll make them worse off or never have a chance to be better off for the one thing that they definitely care about. And this is what we learned in GUD. All people in the world care deeply about their own livelihood and well-being and the livelihood and well-being of their loved ones, whoever that is. But everybody has loved ones. So until we can demonstrate that solving the problem of climate change, preserving and protecting, improving the quality of the environment, doesn't make you poorer, actually economically, it makes you much better off. Until we can change the consciousness around that, we're still going to have this problem, as Donald Trump, and Jair Bolsonaro and lots of other people are still demonstrating. Next. So it's a kind of, this is Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, is a famous modern architect who had, had this great quote. He said, "Less is more." We adapted it, less is the new more. But this is an important idea that we think that the more we waste, the better off we are. The more inputs that we're using up, the more output we have. Whereas the sustainable way of looking at it, which definitely works, is that fewer inputs done more effectively, efficiently, strategically can yield greater output in terms of people's well-being economically in society. Next. So one great example of that, and this goes all the way back to the 1970s, this helped launch the movement. Amory Lovins, who's still around and founded the Rocky Mountain Institute, he coined this term negawatts, meaning not megawatts, but negawatts, no watts. And basically saying that the cheapest, easiest, fastest, and safest energy is the energy that you don't use. And this was a kind of a totally revolutionary idea in the 1970s, that at the time of the energy crisis, people said, oh, it's a total disaster because we have to use more and more and more and more energy. And actually, there's a better way. We can get the energy we need using a lot less of it. Next. So just to give you one example of this, this is a wonderful book about a young environmental activist at Berkeley with the Environmental Defense Fund that was part of the team that was trying to show the electric utilities that rather than build lots of new expensive power plants, whether they would be coal-fired or nuclear powered, that it would be way, way cheaper, and they would actually make more money if they just promoted energy conservation and efficiency. And even though the numbers showed it convincingly over and over again, it was hard to get people to change their mindset. And one of the things that was interesting in California at that time, I don't know if you know about decoupling, where there was this battle over building new power plants. And even though we lost Proposition 9 in 1974, Jerry Brown, the 36-year-old environmentalist, son of the former governor, did get elected governor, and he helped lead this movement, that I was part of, and I worked for him, saying, well, no, we're not going to build lots of more power plants. And the business community said, well, yeah, but if you look at the supply and demand curve, the demand will outrun the supply, and then we'll have a crisis. And then Jerry Brown said, well, and lots of other people around him said, well, why don't we just lower the demand? Would actually be cheaper to just pay people to use less energy than to build lots of new power plants. But then the utilities said, well, yes, but then we lose money. In other words, their whole model is the more electricity used, the more money they made. So if you were using less, they were making less. And then some really smart environmental lawyers said, well, look, the state created the formula. Let's change the formula. So this is the change in consciousness that Einstein was talking about, so we basically said in California that if the utility company, their job is not to sell more electricity, it's to provide energy services. So if the utility companies help businesses and households, insulate their building and, do lots of things, smart metering now, lots of things to actually use less energy, then that's a valuable service utilities are providing. They should get compensated for that. They could make money off of helping people use less energy. That's what decoupling was. And it worked. In fact, it worked so well that one of the environmental lawyers that designed John Bryson later became the CEO of Southern California Edison. So obviously they liked it and it worked. And yet it took decades for any other state even to copy it. So this is the resistance that we're constantly facing. Next.
So Mark,
yeah.
Do you have time for questions in between the
slides?
slides?
Let's go with, because it was a long presentation. I'm happy to take questions, please.
Fantastic. Anyone let's see, we have some questions in the chat box. Anyone like to jump in now? First of all, thank you so much. And what we like to do with our webinars is we kind of mix them up with slides and conversations and questions, and that way everyone is engage you in this information that you know so much about. So, and one thing that we were one of the things down at the bottom of the slides of the Q&A that we're seeing is just more I think I'm not sure who. Oh yeah, it's Jo Carol Fobbs. She writes, the American people seem unaware of their relationship with the earth and the natural world. How do we get them to understand that relationship on a grassroots level? What would you recommend?
Yes, so the grassroots is key, and actually that's what sustainable innovation zones are all about. But it's interesting because forgive me for being philosophical, but I like to say if you go back to all these religions and all these Bibles, that's where a lot of mistakes were made, because somebody came up with the idea that people had dominion over nature or the stewards of nature. When it's totally the other way around. We're part of nature, just like all other living things, and we don't control nature. Nature controls us. And actually, one of the things that's fascinating is this coronavirus thing is proving that. All of a sudden, people are like, "Oh my God, this is something that we don't control." Hopefully, people are thinking ultimately we will. But the interesting thing about the climate change is that all this crazy stuff about geoengineering, that it's never going to work. Even carbon capture and storage hasn't been proven. So the idea that we could solve the problem by dominating nature, bending her to our will, is absurd. We have to accommodate with the flow of how life works on Earth, just like everything else does. And I think it's a difficult challenge, and I guess and this is where I want to talk to you about this replacing economic fear with economic hope. That we felt that one way to break through for people to do the right thing with nature was for it to be aligned directly with their own kind of economic self-interest. It saves you a lot of money. It makes it more possible to have thriving businesses in the future and so forth. And that's partly because it's so difficult to get people to just face this fundamental truth that you're asking about.
Thanks so much. So the next question we have is, it's from Lindy, and she wants to know about a project being developed in Toronto, where she's from, or where she lives.
Yes, it's just in the beginning stages, but the Michael McLennan, who's a Judy Fellow, has stepped forward to try and figure out how to organize a sustainable innovation zone in Toronto, similar to CISPO in Port Alegre. And if you want, I can connect you with them if you'd like to get involved and help out with that. But that's really all of these efforts are, you know, may have support from government and business and academia, but it's a very grassroots, citizen involved, bottom up effort. And that's to make changing for the better something that touches people's lives directly, that they get directly involved in, they directly contribute to, they directly see the results. So it kind of is a middle ground between, okay, things you can do as an individual, like I recycle, and things that the government has to do. Now there's things that communities can do, all working together to change the place where they live and work in real time now, and see the results and experience the benefit from it.
Fantastic. So, well, let's just jump back to the slides for another few minutes. And everyone, as we go through the presentation, be sure to add your questions to the Q&A box. That way we can keep track of them in the order that they come in. You'll find that Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Dr. Weiss.
Okay. Well, this was now this is in Portuguese, but so this economy of sustainability. So as I mentioned, that my feeling, you know, in the 70s, we called it good environment is good economics. Then alternative energy, innovation-led economic development, eventually metropolitan economic strategy. And then even more recently, we have had names of climate prosperity, sustainable economic development, sustainable innovation, even green capitalism when we work with the Republicans. And but this is what this whole approach is all about, is getting people to see that you actually can grow businesses, jobs, and incomes, have greater prosperity and higher quality of life for more people and more places in an inclusive way everywhere by becoming more sustainable. So as we say, if you get richer by becoming greener, not poorer. Okay, next. So there it is. There's the slogan. Oh, no, we'll go back one. Yeah. So I won't read this whole quote, but you can see if you read the first paragraph that makes the argument and you see how we flipped it, where the first argument is that this is just good economically. The second argument is that at the same time it's good economically, it's also the best way to become more sustainable, including to deal with climate change. So even if people say, I don't even care about the environment, or I don't believe climate change exists, something, it's still a good thing to do. And this is where this graphic that one of our clever geodeers made is so important, because normally in the way, in the standard way of thinking and the way the Trumpists and lots of others still think, these arrows would be going in opposite directions. So economic development would be going one way, sustainable would be going the other way. Instead, we have the arrows going towards each other, and in the diamond where they merge, that's where the sustainable economic development, sustainable innovation is. So that trying to get across that idea that the two things go together, they're not separate and they're not in conflict. And in fact, economic development that's unsustainable, that's anti-environment, is much worse economically as well as environmentally. Next. So here you have, and how do you do it? See, I spent my whole career, I was as a professor, as a policymaker, as a public official, and so forth, as a kind of, among other things, an expert on subnational economic development. So economic development for states and provinces, for cities, counties, regions, and communities. And this model works on what we call the 4 greens. It's a very Chinese way of saying it. It starts with green savings, that becoming more sustainable doesn't cost you money, it saves you money. And when people, that's something that they think, becoming more sustainable is like charity, it's like going to church, I should do it, even though it's like a sacrifice, but no, it's actually good for you. It saves you money. So once people begin to experience that, even if something like a LED light bulb, it begins to change their consciousness. And here's the good news. All the things that we do to achieve green savings involve new ways of doing things, new products, new services, new production processes, so forth. And those are the green opportunities. That is the growth of the 21st century. Everything that we do along those lines creates and grows jobs and businesses and incomes. So it's a virtuous cycle because we pay for that new growth out of the savings. The more you save, the more there is to reinvest in even doing more. So that's how those two things go together. And then the other 2 elements are green talent. It's the most important economic asset in the world now. It's not any kind of resource, not oil, not anything, it's people and their skills. So investing in the green skills of tomorrow is vital. And it happens in places where people live and work and play. So part of the whole transformation is transforming the places themselves and then scaling that up. And that's actually what sustainable innovations zones are about, applying the first 3 for the 4th to transform communities into green places. Next. So just to say a little bit about this California history, how this evolved. Beginning in 1979 in Berkeley, California, I was one of the people that did the first sustainable economic development strategy of any in the U.S., of any city in the U.S. or in the U.S. period, where I go to the next slide, where now this was a comprehensive strategy that also was highly inclusive and equity oriented in terms of the African-American community, which was a third of the population of the city. But a centerpiece of this plan was for Berkeley to become a world center of energy efficiency and alternative energy. We didn't have the term renewable energy yet, but it was alternative to fossil fuels. See? And to some extent, that actually did happen with the university, with Lawrence Berkeley Labs, and with the city in the decades since then. The strategy was implemented and it worked. Although one piece of it you can see here, which was the alternative energy industrial park, we almost did it. We came very close with this huge Colgate-Palmolive plant that closed that they were going to donate, and at the last minute they changed their mind. So this didn't happen, but the overall plan did happen. Next. And then at the same time, I was the deputy director of what was called the California Commission on Industrial Innovation, created by Governor Brown, co-chaired by David Packard from HP and Steve Jobs from Apple, who was a young guy, like I was a young guy back then. I was the deputy director of this. And the whole idea behind this was that, most of the technology that, that Silicon Valley was so famous for at that time was all about war. It was either nuclear war, killing everyone, or the Vietnam War, killing Vietnamese. And we said, why shouldn't technology be for peace? Instead of bombing people, how about making them healthier? Instead of killing people, how about educating them, and making it possible for people to communicate better? And and to some extent, we know that happened. That's why we're talking together on Zoom right now of information communication technologies and so on. But keep in mind, at that time, sustainable innovation wasn't even a separate thing. It was part of the whole idea. In fact, there were 4 huge innovations. That one was energy efficiency, which was gigantic. All what you had to do to change machines, buildings, appliances to operate just as well or better with fewer energy. Another was solar energy from photovoltaic cells that came from the same material that the microchips came from, the same silicon. That was a big new invention then. The third was the modern wind turbines, another big new invention then. And all these things were happening in California. And fourth was electric vehicles, which even though that was something old, brought back in a modern form. And look, now today we have Tesla. Next. So there were three ways that this good environment and good economics began to happen. The first one I talked about, which was the this idea of sustainable innovation and clean technology. So, one of the things, I don't know if you remember the movie Avatar, which on the one hand was wonderful because it showed the error of our ways. Here we were such a wasteful world that we ran out of resources. We had to go invade another planet to take their resources away from them. That was a good message. But then the tough part of it was the good people that we were invading ran around naked and, lived in trees and, ate natural plants. And so it wasn't an attractive lifestyle for the 21st century for most people. So if you say, okay, if this is what I need to do to be green, I think maybe I would rather keep my car and my computer and my phone and so on and so forth. So one of the things that was important about the sustainable innovation and clean technology model, we said, no, we don't need to go backwards. We can go forward and be way more sustainable and still have the benefits of all these machinery and equipment. So you're not sacrificing anything, really. You're just making it better for yourself and for the planet. Next. So the sustainable innovation was the first part. The second part, which I talked about some, was the green savings. That because of the energy crisis in 1973, that by the time Jerry Brown became governor, California was in the process of putting in place much stricter energy conservation and efficiency standards on all new motor vehicles, on all new electronic appliances, equipment, and on all new buildings. And now in the early days, you can see that the rest of the US was also doing that, but then they stopped. When the oil prices dropped and there was no more shortage, most of the rest of the US, remember Reagan Carter put solar panels on the White House and Reagan took them off. He said, okay, now we can go back to, we have cheap oil again, we can use it as much as we want and waste as much as we want. But California stuck with it. And look what happened, as of 2006, it was clearly proven that because of the different path that California took of getting the same benefit out of the same buildings, the same vehicles, the same equipment, but just using less energy to operate. For example, refrigerators are, because of what California insisted on, and it was a big enough market to make the manufacturers comply, they're orders of magnitude more efficient than they were then, even though the manufacturers said it was impossible to make them more efficient, as they all did. So the net of that is, as of 2006, people had saved a total from the 70s of $56 billion with a B. Now, at this point, it's definitely more than 100 billion. That's like a pay increase for individuals, improves the bottom line for businesses. It enables governments to operate more efficiently without having to raise taxes on every level, including, not only did that create a lot of jobs directly, but what did people do with the money they saved? They reinvested it in the state rather than going out of the state. And that alone, according to a Berkeley econometric study, created 1.5 million jobs. So in every way you look at it, in Portland, where they did the urban growth boundary, and by having more transit, more bike lanes, a little bit more urban density, so people could walk and so forth. They found people were saving $2 billion a year. And what did people do with the extra money that they were saving, not driving cars as much? They started going out, eating and drinking more. So that gave birth to the craft beer industry. In fact, they had a slogan in Portland: drive less, drink more beer. So this savings is really good for the economy every way you look at it, and the environment. Next. And the third way, and this was very important in shifting the mindset, and you may be familiar with this today because there was if you know about the creative class literature that grew over the last decade or so. But one of the things that we were able to show back then is the growth of Silicon Valley and the area around it, and happened for three reasons. One was, the most important reason was all of the military and space spending billions of dollars on research and development from the federal government that went into that region. But second was Stanford University, Stanford Research Institute, Stanford Industrial Park, a kind of an intellectual science and engineering oriented infrastructure. But the third reason, which was equally as important, was that it was a beautiful place. So all of the scientists and engineers and so forth really wanted to live there and loved living there. And so you had a lot of highly skilled people that were necessary. As I mentioned, people are the most important economic asset. And here's the thing: if the place had gotten ruined, if it had gotten so polluted and so congested, everybody would have left and gone somewhere else. So that the high quality of life was actually good for the economy. And the most important element of this high quality of life was having a beautiful environment. So it was the first time they were able to demonstrate that good environment is good economics. Next. So just to go, I'm going to go quicker now and how all of this evolved. Then already back, decades later, we went back to Silicon Valley to do this climate prosperity strategy and create something that's still going called the Climate Prosperity Council to focus on the region becoming more sustainable and reducing emissions. Next. GOD, we did the same in many other places, a new kind of advanced approach in San Jose, in San Antonio, in state of Delaware, in Portland, Oregon, and next. And in Portland, that initiative gave birth to a movement in the US and Canada called eco districts, which is later became one of the models for sustainable innovation zones, people working together to green their own communities. Next. Another thing we did that was funded by the US Department of Energy, the only sustainable economic development strategy ever funded under President Obama, we did for Sarasota County, Florida, after the global financial crisis, and they were hurting, and but it's a lot of old people that are retired and they wanted to preserve their nice, lovely environment. So they wanted GUD to show them how to do a green economic development. We did, and here's the thing: they were all Republicans. The entire board of supervisors were Republicans. They voted unanimously to hire us. They voted unanimously to accept our report and implement it. But that was back before the days where I think beginning in 2010 with the Tea Party, where it became impossible for Republicans anywhere to have this kind of view. And in fact, Charlie Crist, who was the governor then, who supported this initiative, he was a Republican governor then, now is a Democratic congressman from that part of Florida. Next. One thing in particular, there's that is connected with GUD. There's this business in California called Rev that works with small and medium-sized companies who can't afford to hire their own consultants and have chief sustainability officers, and in a kind of what they call sustainability circles, like group therapy, where they work with a bunch of companies together, It's subsidized by the utilities, pay 3/4 of the cost because it's part of what we created in the 70s, where the utilities get compensated for promoting energy conservation efficiency. And these small businesses that pay very little, like I think it's $2,500 to do this incredible program, then in the first year are saving $350,000. So this is the kind of approach that we need to be spreading everywhere in businesses and communities, in governments. Next. In climate change, one thing that that's related, because you had this debate going from the very beginning, where the rich countries who are doing all the emissions were then telling everyone, oh, you can't, we have to reduce emissions. And the poor countries were saying, well, wait a second, we didn't cause the problem. Why should we be punished by the solution? We want to grow our economies. So clearly the win-win solution that we called it the Global Climate Prosperity Agreement, the $1 trillion deal, was for in addition to what governments were doing, for the private sector to invest for profit in renewable energy and clean technologies in developing countries, 100 billion a year for a decade, for 10 years. So that's where the trillion came from. That was a win-win all the way around. The growth in the developing world would increase demand for goods and services for the developed world. So it was an economic win-win, and it was an environmental win-win, because if the developing world grew sustainably, then people would be becoming much better off without increasing emissions. In fact, helping the world to reduce emissions. Next. And then we took the work that I showed you that we're doing in the U.S. at that point back into GUD globally through this thing called the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, created by President Obama and other presidents, President Lula in Brazil and others, that went from Canada all the way to Argentina to have a kind of a solution for the North, Central, and South America. And we organized the first ever in the world international conference on sustainable economic development for the Americas in 2011 in Curitiba, Brazil. Next. And here's the amazing thing that, doesn't get enough attention. It's already happening. That in 2009, leading up to the Copenhagen summit, we, GUD, working with something called Ethical Markets Media, Hazel Henderson heads that, we created this thing called the Green Transition Scoreboard. And we, to show that this movement to invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency, with life systems, green construction, corporate green R&D was already happening because it was cheaper and smarter. And so in the first one that we did in 2009, it went from the third quarter of 2007 to the end of 2009, we totaled in the world $1.25 trillion investment. Now it's up to 10.4 trillion. So it's massive, it's happening, although most of this is happening just in a limited number of countries, mostly in the global north. So it's vital that it spread more around the world. And that's one of the reasons why we're working here in Brazil. Next.
Mark?
Yeah.
Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
You've given us a lot of really great history, and some of it for me was very shocking, like the depth of knowledge that people had even 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and how much money was saved when you showed that graph about the difference between California and the rest of the United States. That was pretty startling. I'm from Ohio, so nobody ever saved anything there. They never tried to be. I don't even think they're more energy efficient now. I don't want to say that this information was kept a secret, but it seems like it wasn't widely dispersed. I mean, I think if more people understood that these things are already going on and they're saving people millions of dollars a year, like more people would jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, well, this is the, I know somebody earlier today talked about merchants of doubt, but yeah, this is what we're up against, that the fossil fuel industry and, and their allies and related industries got out early to fight this hard with lots of control in the media, eventually basically took over the Republican Party. So you have one party that, wasn't true back then, by the way, but, became true now. And so it's hard to get, like, for example, we did decoupling in California in the 1970s, right? And even now, like when my wife Nancy and I, we live in Delaware, and even in 2009, when new governor got elected, we were trying to get them to do it. It's like, what? That is interesting why this didn't spread. But let me say one thing that's the good news, and why it's important to use California as an example in this particular way, because it relates to how you change the consciousness, you see. Because when we started in California, it was a huge battle. And I remember Ronald Reagan was the governor, and later then he became president. And but by putting in place the changes, that enough of them stayed in place, promoting renewable energy, promoting the energy efficiency and so forth, and conservation, that over time, people began to experience the change. And then it began to be, oh, I get it. If we have energy efficiency, that's really good for me. That doesn't cost me money. That saves me a lot of money. And so as the time went on, it became more and more mainstream, such that by you get into the 21st century and you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, a Republican governor, decided to go ahead and have what was called the Global Warming Solutions Act, which was very popular, and that's how he got reelected, you see. And then in 2010, and this is the single most important fact that the media totally ignored. So now I know it's Democrats abroad, so it's perfect to talk about this. In 2010, you had an election. Well, first of all, let me say one point about Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown, in his first two terms from 1975 to 1981, was seen on these environment and energy issues to being a crazy radical. They even called him Governor Moonbeam, you see. He was a crazy radical. And he had all these people around him, and I was young, but I was one of them, that were crazy radicals, that had these nutty ideas that were going to ruin everything and destroy everything. And then he comes back and gets elected again governor in 2010. 3 decades later, after serving as mayor of Oakland, attorney general. And here's the interesting thing. When Jerry Brown came back, and he just left office last year and served 2 terms, his views on these issues had not changed at all. But California's had changed. Their views had changed. So when he came back, he was like a mainstream centrist governor with the exact same viewpoint. And here's how you can illustrate that most profoundly. In the 2010 election, Jerry Brown ran for governor. Barbara Boxer ran for re-election to the Senate. And the fossil fuel industry from Texas put a ballot initiative on the ballot because we were in the middle of the economic crisis. Unemployment in California at that time was 11%. So they put this initiative on the ballot. They said, we want to roll back all of the environmental and energy regulations until unemployment gets down to 4%, because it's really costing a lot and hurting the economy, you see. And they put a lot of money into this ballot initiative. But 2 things happened. First of all, the more you do this kind of work, the more you're building new constituencies that appreciate the benefits of it. So you had, even though there were some businesses that were for this referendum, you also had a lot of the technology industry, a lot of the media industry in Hollywood, and all of the new renewable energy and so forth, businesses that put a lot of money into opposing it. So we had a standoff, you see, there were businesses on either side. And when the final votes were counted, Californians voted 61% no against this initiative. Only 39% voted in favor. And here's the most interesting thing. Jerry Brown and Barbara Boxer both won with like 53%. So 7% of voters that voted for Republican for governor, Republican for Senate, voted no on rolling back the energy environmental regulations.
Wow. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A box also. This question comes from Connie Board. She's in France. Her question is, you live in Brazil. With a president like Bolsonaro, are you challenged by his adverse environment policies?
Oh, totally. It's just a complete disaster. Luckily, it's a federal system. So where we are, you know, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, in the city of Porto Alegre, you know, and other, you know, it's he wants to be a dictator like they used to have here, but he isn't yet. So a lot of things are being done at the federal level are bad, but they're, you know, and to some extent at the state level and municipal level, people are holding the line. But it's a really horrible situation because, for example, on the Amazon, which is really a very much a federal issue, it's terrible what's being done. And you know, and the interesting thing is that it also, you know, we came here to try and alter people's conscience here to say, oh, here, Grande do Sul could become like California. Or we also would mention like Baden-Württemberg in Germany, because a lot of people of German descent here, a state that, you know, that has Freiburg, that where the Green Party is very strong. And but this challenge of shifting the mindset, of having people really get the way it took 4 decades for people to get in California, way it took 3 decades for people to get to some extent in Germany and Denmark, you know, and in Scandinavia and so forth, that you're actually better off economically being greener as well as environmentally. That's the replacing economic hope with economic fear. That's a very tough challenge. And which is why we went to, instead of doing what we used to do, which is these bigger economic strategies for cities and states and counties and so forth, to focusing on sustainable innovation zones, where working communities to organize people. So they're directly involved, they're directly making the change, they're directly seeing that it works.
Okay, we have one last question in the chat box. Regarding current and potential green savings described, and to follow up on Angela's question about getting out the word widely, won't green savings be going into different pockets than where profits go now, like the fossil fuel industry and their allies? Therefore, those profiting now help keep the word from getting out. Exactly.
You said it perfectly. Yeah, and this is where, you know, it's interesting because now you have some academics at Berkeley and other universities that are looking at California, looking at Germany and Denmark, came out with this term, the green spiral, where you, and what they mean by that is that from a public policy point of view, in terms of having stronger environmental laws and policies and regulations, in terms of doing things to really reduce emissions, that if you start with the green savings and people really experience it, then you're doing two things. One, you're changing their attitude, and you're also building up new constituencies, including new business constituencies that are on the side of that benefit from the change. And the more you do that, then politically, you're in a stronger position to take the next step, you see. And anyway, so yeah, it doesn't always work. Look at now how insane it is that, which the film a few hours ago showed, that Trump administration would be rolling back fuel economy standards that even the car makers are against, right? Even they didn't want to roll back the fuel efficiency standards. Makes them less competitive in the world. They're going to sell fewer cars. But the fossil fuel industry insisted on it because they were threatened by people using less, gas, to run the cars.
How do you think they feel now, the fossil fuel industry?
Well, this is the interesting. Maybe I'll jump in. I know I have more that I wanted to talk about, including this Ray Anderson, and then of Dispo I haven't even shown you yet. But here's the thing that I've been getting increasingly worried because we know we're running out of time. I mean, if every place in the world had done what California did starting in the 1970s, we wouldn't even be worried about climate change at this point. It would not be a problem. We would have kept emissions ultimately below 350, and still had a more modern, more advanced, more technological economy with more people and places prosperous than before. But that didn't happen. And now it's really difficult to see how to turn this around in the next decade. And now I'll get to my surprise punchline. So which is in all the time that I've been involved in these issues, so in this last half century, and climate change since the late 80s, this whole notion of economic fear has been working against us. And what makes it so difficult with climate change is that, I say Gaia, I call Mother Nature Gaia. Gaia gave human beings, human civilization, this conundrum because we were doing something that would ultimately lead to our total destruction. And now is the time to change while we still easily could for our own benefit in every way you look at it. But the problem is that climate change is abstract and distant. You can't see the greenhouse gases or smell them or touch them or feel them in the atmosphere, even compared to, the old other types of pollution where you could see the smokestacks and feel the effects. So it's a scientific argument that there's a relationship between all of that and impacts on extreme weather and shocks. So people had the luxury of choosing either to say, okay, I believe it, but we have plenty of time to change. We don't need to do it now. We could do it later. So that's one human instinct, procrastinate, let's put it off till the future. The other one was climate denial. People say, I just don't believe it. You can't prove it to me. It's a hoax, etc. And so because it's abstract and distant, then the human fear, what you would call the survival instinct, the fight or flight syndrome, is not kicking in. So the climate change is like an intellectual thing. Now, at this point, we have a lot of evidence of droughts and wildfires and horrible, horrible stuff that's happening, but people can still choose to bury their head in the sand about it, not to see the cause and see their responsibility in the solution. So the fear that should be working in our favor that, Al Gore tried with Inconvenient Truth and so forth. It's just not kicking in. It is about, now you have Greta Thunberg. So among young people, I think it is kicking in now. Unfortunately, they're not in power, but among most of the society, most of the world, it's not kicking in fast enough. Now, there will come a point when it will become so extremely bad that it will kick in and people will be totally terrified. And at that point, they would do anything to try and stop it. They would cut off their left arm to save their right. But here's the tragedy. By that point, it will be too late. It will be irreversible. So this was what sustainable innovation, inclusive prosperity was always all about, was how do we get people to act now when they think they don't need to act now? Either they can wait till later or they don't need to act at all with respect to these global environmental issues. So we said we're going to try and trick them, say, just do it because it's economically better for you. It saves you money. Just do it for that. Why would you be against that? Now we find out because of what the fossil fuel has done, that it created this sort of ideology, and evangelicals are buying. We now have people that are against saving money on LED bulbs, like it's some kind of sacrilegious communist thing. So even that turned out to be tougher than he thought. But here's the point. For the first time ever, now with coronavirus, that anybody can easily catch anywhere by human contact, we have a game changer potentially. Because now the human fear, survival instinct, after all, it could kill you, is kicking in. So this is why we see, let's spend billions and trillions of dollars. Now, unfortunately, it was not enough money is going into the right things. Too much is going into try and bail out business, but some of that's good because we have to, people are losing jobs. But this is my point. For the first time ever, economic fear, which has been working against us this last half century, is now working in our favor. You see, because number one, we don't know how long this is going to last. Could be 2 or 3 years. And number two, it's so severe. And number three, here's the beauty of it, the solutions involve becoming more sustainable. So instead, this is what's happening in the oil industry now. People are not traveling, on planes or on vehicles, or staying at home and communicating online. That's cleaning up the air tremendously. So we're in sheltering in place out of survival. We're also using a lot fewer resources more efficiently, and people are experiencing, wow, it's not so bad. There's actually not only is it helping the environment, but from a personal lifestyle point of view, there are some real benefits from it. And the longer it goes on, the more it might not change back. And so this is where, since we have this crisis of people losing jobs, losing incomes, losing businesses that we have to address, the way to address it is to say, okay, let's figure out new ways of growing new kinds of businesses and new kinds of jobs and new kinds of incomes that accommodate this crisis, that are, for the most part, much more sustainable. And for example, wouldn't it make more sense to have solar energy and it's decentralized, rather than shipping the oil all over the place, and on and on and on. I'm sure everybody can think of many, many examples. I've been reading lots of articles about this lately, where the changes that would make us stronger, as Christina said, more resilient, are changes to the economy that will make places more competitive, better able to survive this crisis, that are more sustainable. So to the extent that we now link what is the economic solution to this change, this longer term change in becoming more sustainable. That's the way we're going to reduce emissions without even having to say we're doing it because of climate change, you see. So even climate deniers are going to say, well, for sure, you know, we've got to invest in more broadband infrastructure and do less traveling, save ourselves from dying, right? And so we may have an opportunity here. And this is one of the things that GUD is beginning to look at, is how to try and maximize the opportunity to say, well, let's just have emergency bailouts and then go back to the old way. Let's have, you know, bailouts that point toward the future and move into a new, more sustainable future.
Mark, we have another question, and this time from one of our panelists who will speak later. Perhaps he'd like to unmute and ask his own questions.
Please.
Jim Christensen?
Sure. If you can hear me,
Yes.
you've already partially answered it. I was intrigued by your comments about working with Sarasota in 2010, and I've had the same experience of the whole attitude and language and
2011.
Republicans.
Yeah, 2010 and 2011. Yeah.
So my question is, I have family in Florida. I pay a lot of attention to politics there. Everyone is concerned with flooding. I've noticed that Republican mayors, Republican county officials will talk about mitigating flooding and talk about dealing with flooding without ever mentioning the phrase climate change, without ever talking about the causation. But they see it as something they have to do something about. And I'm curious, do you have any other advice? Your insight about using economic fear turning the other direction is really important, I think. But do you have any other advice and suggestions about dealing with the denialists? Because the psychologists who look at this say it's part of their tribal identity now. You know, they can't admit climate change.
Right, but well, let me just share our experience in Florida. So here you have a situation where Sarasota County, one of the oldest, in terms of the median age, one of the oldest counties in the U.S., one of a very affluent county, and that people were not concerned about. They didn't, economic development was, just sell real estate, right? And all of a sudden you had the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, and for the first time ever, they're like, oh, now we're losing money and property values have dropped, and maybe we need to think about having more businesses and jobs, right? And this was the interesting thing, but because it was a beautiful place, they were like, oh, well, if we want to, the whole, and and a lot of them are people come from Ohio and like Canada and so forth. So they had the mentality, well, if we do economic development, we're going to pollute the place and ruin it, right? Which is what we did where we came from before we came here as snowbirds, and in the places where we still live and own businesses and whatever. So we don't want to do that here. So then they're like, is there some way we could grow the economy without polluting it and ruining the place? And they're like, oh, global urban development, that's what they do. So this was even interesting that, because we're, on the progressive side and they weren't, but we were in sync. We said, yes, there would be a way to grow the economy without ruining the place. In fact, we even called our final report was called Prosperity in Paradise. And so they said, we want to become a center for innovation in energy and sustainability. And they got this big grant from the Energy Department to hire us to do it. Now, in the short run, they got overwhelmed by this Fox News mania, and probably some of these Republican supervisors that hired us don't want to admit that they ever did. But I do think that that's going to change now increasingly, as just for the reason you pointed out, because in the same way that it started, as county officials, as city officials, have to deal with the real world of real problems like flooding, from sea level rise and if you read this book, Jeff Goodell, The Water Will Come, which is a lot of that's about Florida. Even if they don't want to mention climate change because they're afraid of getting attacked on Twitter, they realize that the right solutions go only one way, and if they actually want to solve the problem, then people like us is who they have to turn to that know how to do it. And so, by the way, that's why we came up with at that time when Chris was governor, we were calling it green capitalism, and we were going to come up with the Florida model. There was the California model of sustainability. That was the Democrats' model. Then there would be the Florida model. The Republicans also had a way of become more sustainable. That was economically good. But that got blown out by this fossil fuel funded Tea Party wave. And I knew that we were in trouble because I think 1 or 2 years later, the Sarasota County Republican Party gave Donald Trump their Man of the Year award. And oh no.
Bad news.
So, but I think we have another chance now. I really do.
Okay, that's great. I have one other short question that's an ongoing issue. I'm going to be speaking later tonight about influencing environmental policy as part of Democrats Abroad.
Yes.
And most of us, pretty much all of us in Democrats Abroad have full-time jobs, but I've been a part-time environmental activist for renewable energy since 2005 through Democrats Abroad. Have you had experience working with citizens who are in situations like me, who are interested in moving things in the direction that you proposed in Sarasota or elsewhere? And do you have any suggestions for us to work most effectively with you and with the local politicians in various places in the U.S. or in the case of Democrats Abroad in influencing American policy as a whole?
Well, one of the, like I said, I've been at this for a half century and actually for nearly 2 decades with GUD, where we have worked globally in a lot of places. But I now believe, obviously I'm biased since we spent the last 4.5 years on it and I helped create it over the last decade. I believe sustainable innovation zones is a really good way to go. And I'm happy, and one of the things we want is now for people in cities and towns around. It doesn't need to be big cities like Santo Angelo is like 80,000 people, but in cities around the world for people to get together to create these zones, working with universities, with business and government and like I said, the beauty of it is that you don't have to just vote or lobby or do individual things. It gives people a way to work together collaboratively, on a voluntary basis as citizens to improve an area by making it more sustainable that generates new businesses, that generates new jobs and incomes, that comes up with new things that they want, like we've built the sustainable parklets and charging stations and solar posts and so on. And so it enables you to work with other people to take real action now that has small results, but it's educating people that's building towards a bigger future change, that it can be scaled up physically and also can be scaled up in the realm of consciousness, where these new, like we saw, when we did, it's funny, I haven't gotten to that part of the presentation. When we completed the leapfrog strategy in 2015, and people thought it's impossible, it'll never happen here. It was a really nice idea if we could have a better economy by becoming more sustainable. But we know probably we can't. Maybe California, Germany could, but we don't think we can. And so then when we said, well, let's show that we can. So people already agreed that they would like the idea if they could. And so the next step was, well, let's show that we can. And so doing ZSPOA really, over these 4.5 years has had a big impact on the thinking of the professors and administrators in the universities, on the public officials at the city level and state level, on the business community, where even though it's still, small steps, we haven't accomplished that much, but it generated a lot of enthusiasm, especially from the younger generation, people in their 20s and 30s. So for many of these senior leaders, that in some cases that was their own children. And so they were like, now well, maybe we should try it. Maybe it could work. You see, that's a huge step forward. Any other, let me maybe try to do a little bit more on the first part and then go quickly through the second part. Because now you have.
I was muted, but thank you very much, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So let me just say this book, I recommend this book to everyone. This is one of the best books ever, written by this wonderful man, Ray Anderson, who tells this personal story. This came out right before he died in 2009. And I wanted Hollywood to make a movie called Green Man, where Tom Hanks would play Ray Anderson, but wasn't able to convince anybody to do it yet. But here's this guy who, he was an engineer from Atlanta, Georgia. He went into a very heavy business, industrial carpeting, very pollution heavy, where they make these huge sheets of carpets for convention centers and office buildings and hotels and so forth. He started his own innovative variation on that called Interface, where instead of in big sheets, they made it in small tiles where they could, more flexible in terms of how they put them together. It became successful, became a Fortune 500 company. And then in the early 90s, he reads Paul Hawken's book, The Ecology of Commerce. And he decides that even though Interface was complying with all environmental laws, that they were really ruining the planet. They were really polluting a lot. And so he said, maybe we could become greener. And can you imagine in 1994, all the senior executives thought he was nuts. All the board of directors thought he was nuts. All the investors and lenders on Wall Street thought he was nuts. But he was the chairman and CEO and founder of the company. And so he slowly wore everyone down and said, well, let's try it. And they followed this thing, they call it the natural step, came out of Sweden, was 7 steps, they added a few. And the book tells the story, starting with zero waste, step by step by step, what they did, how they did it, what were the results. And remember, he's an engineer. So it's a lot of numbers, a lot of practical facts and, what they were up against, what they accomplished. And here was the net result by the time this book came out. First of all, by becoming more sustainable in terms of waste reduction, they saved $500 million. Right off the bat, that was pretty good, right? So that's green savings. Second, green opportunities. They invented a newer type of carpeting that was more eco-friendly. And here was the beautiful thing. On the one hand, the way they did this new kind of carpeting was cheaper to produce because it used fewer resources. And at the other hand, because it was the only carpeting that was eco-friendly, then it became in great demand. Like people wanted the Interface carpeting to have more sustainable carpeting. So their not only did their costs go down, their revenues went up, their market share went up, their profits went up. So that's green opportunities. They became, even though he did it from the heart, he wasn't even trying to make more money. They made a lot more money. It became a much bigger company by being greener. In addition, green talent, because they switched to having a social mission, this industrial carpeting company started attracting lots of idealistic people that wanted to be in business, work for a company that was doing good for the planet. So they were able to attract much and retain much higher quality talent to go to Atlanta or wherever they had facilities to work for Interface. So that strengthened them enormously. And then finally, green places, everywhere they had a facility. They put on solar panels, they had bike parking and showers, they had recycling, they had everything they could do to work with the community, contribute to the community, to be a good eco-citizen and be more sustainable. And so, and here's the thing, so they put on the next slide. We make this distinction between clean tech businesses, which is a Silicon Valley term, and green businesses. So clean tech business, not every business, like a solar, if you're installing solar panels, it's a clean tech business. So those are businesses that explicitly, directly do things to, help the environment. So not every business is a clean tech business, but Ray Anderson proved that every business and organization in the world could become green in terms of what they did and what they do and how they do it. So that's a very powerful message. And then what we said is that, well, what Ray Anderson did for Interface, we could do for Atlanta. The same ideas and practices and rules that apply to a company or an organization or institution applies to a place where there are lots of businesses and lots of organizations and institutions. So I wanted to really emphasize that. So let's go, I'm going to go really fast. Let's see, what's the next slide here? I lost track. Okay, so here, if you want, I'm not going to talk about the leapfrog strategy itself. If you go to globalurban.org or globalurban.net or zispoa.info, you can download it and read the whole thing. It's alive and well and slowly moving forward we'll see where it gets to by 2030. Two of the young, smart people that were activists of ZSPOA are now working for the state government on helping to advance these ideas and this initiative. Next. So the heart of the strategy was to do sustainable innovation zones in cities all over the state. Next. This is the important thing. Sustainable innovation zones combine these 6 things together. They have to have all 6 elements: innovation and technology, entrepreneurship and startups, sustainability and resource efficiency, creativity and collaboration, participatory community management, and business-friendly environment. But the sustainability and resource efficiency is sort of the overarching goal of the whole thing. So even though it's one of the 6 elements, all of the other elements feed into it. So it's innovation and technology for sustainability, entrepreneurship and startups for sustainability, creativity and collaboration for sustainability, and so forth. Next. Now, this book that just came out, which is a case study of New York City about this whole idea of innovation ecosystem, innovation complex, innovation district. Reason I'm mentioning that is that, in a way, a sustainable innovation zone is a variation on that. Next. With the difference being, it's not just any innovation, it's innovation for sustainability and resource efficiency. That's the whole purpose of it. And then these other distinctions, it emphasizes community as a place-based experiment. So it's not just people gathered in a place to do innovations for the world, it's people gathered in a place to do sustainable innovations for their own place where they're all gathered. Third, in addition to the usual suspects, the scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs and investors, over you've got adds sustainability and social entrepreneurs and innovators and activists as part of the mix. And lastly, that it's built on this model of a grassroots citizen university, private sector movement working with government, but it's not a government initiative per se. Next. So this is from, I was in the nonprofit low and moderate income community development movement for all of my life. So this comes out of that perspective, navigating community development. And so they coined this term community development ecosystem, which has been done in low and moderate communities, both urban and rural, to grow businesses, jobs, provide better services, so forth. So a sustainable innovation zone is also in addition to being a certain type of sustainable innovation ecosystem, it's also a sustainable community development ecosystem. Next. And here's very important, it is one of the best ways of actually doing a local Green New Deal, where you don't have to wait for the city government to do it, the state government to do it, the national government to do it. People in communities can do their own version of it and get the support of the city government, the state government, and the national government. Next. So I mentioned Freiburg there in the south of Germany that became the solar capital of Germany, a really amazing place, very green in many ways, but they have this clean city cluster. As of 5 years ago, they'd already created 12,000 green jobs, you know, so it's a very good model. So that was one model that we drew on. Another was Barcelona, what's called 22 at. Another one was East London Tech City. Next. And another one that I was involved in, I talked about earlier, Noma, where we took an area that looked like this in 1997, and go to the next slide. Now it looks like this, where we can see we preserved some older buildings where there were some, and built new one, but it's very green, transit oriented, bike oriented, you know, recycling oriented. That was one of the attractions. Became not only the hippest new place for people to live and move into, but also the greenest place. Next. So we recommended sustainable innovation zones for Rio Grande do Sul, with the first one being in Porto Alegre. Next. And we even said that if Rio Grande do Sul would become a leader in sustainable innovation for Latin America, that Porto Alegre could be, like Freiburg or Berkeley, a leader in sustainable innovation for the entire world. Next. So this was our slogan that comes from Lao Tzu thousands of years ago in China. A long journey begins with a single step. So we said, let's just get started and see what we can do. And next. Now I'll show you this 3 minute. When we started, we started with a course, and within a few weeks, the word got around everywhere. Oh, this is a really cool thing happening. And the city government came and made a video, which even now, 4.5 years later, is short and inspiring. So let's go ahead and play this video. Oops. Is there no sound? Is that it? I'm not getting any sound. Is anybody getting sound? Do I need to?
No, I don't have sound.
Oh,
Do
all
you have
right.
sound?
Kelly, could you stop the video and
Yeah,
then-
don't. No,
Wait, no,
you
no,
don't
no,
need to.
you can reshare it, but you have to tell it, you have to stop the sharing and then go back and reshare it. But there's a little button at the bottom that says include computer sound.
Okay.
Kelly, do you hear me? She does not. I asked Kelly to take over with the slides, and
All right. Well, okay. Well.
and I don't know. She's like, no.
All right. Well, it's okay. You can watch it without the sound, and hey, well.
Okay, we only have 10 minutes left. Here's
Okay. Let's stop it then. Let's stop it.
Okay.
It's not inspiring without the sound. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, so let's go. I want to go just super quickly. Go back to, where were we? Okay. All right. Let me go to the whatever. Okay. Go to the next slide. I'm going to go like super quick. So we have Zispo has its own website, which you can go to. Please, next. I'm going to keep saying next a lot. Okay. Has a lot of documents that you can read, and some of them are in English. And you can also get them at globalurban.net. For example, this is a 2016 United Nations Development Program publication where we have an article. Next. And then keep going, keep going. And then the next one is a 2020 UN Habitat article. So I'm just referring, there's lots of things that you can read. Keep going, please. There's the map. Stop. Yeah, so we started with part of 2 neighborhoods. Now it's all are part of 10 neighborhoods. So it grew and grew and grew as people got more involved and more enthusiastic. Next. You see, we adopted the 6 elements. Next. There's the Portuguese version. We adopted these 5 goals or objectives to become the most digitally connected, the most solar powered, the most energy efficient, the most renewable technology friendly, which we defined as zero waste circular economy, and the most bike friendly. Next. Keep going and we'll just scroll through. We began with doing these courses, which is what the video showed. Keep going. And so that was a great way to mobilize lots and lots of people. We made this partnership with one of the main universities in Brazil that's in the zone. And so that we created a project there at the engineering school. Next. We created a network called ZISPROF of professors at the Federal University and many other universities that's really vital. It does 2 things. Go ahead. Next slide. Number 1, does mentoring for lots of projects and startups and all of that. Next. And also teaches classes where the students in the classes get to do ZISPOA related, sustainable innovation related projects, research projects and action project, which is how we're able to get a lot of work done. And the students they learn a lot, they have a lot of fun, they get course credit for it. Next. Here was one example. One thing that was amazing was, and this is important for those of you who want to do it, from the time that we started, within 2 years, the city government, both the mayor and the city council, voted unanimously, even though they're fighting about almost everything else, to support ZISPOA and officially recognize it. So it was a really good example that this cuts across the political spectrum. It's all about the future. Next. We were picked by the government of Sweden, and we worked with them on sustainable mobility. Next, starting with a webinar, then with the Sweden-Brazil Innovation Week, which you can see was all the only city in Brazil that focused on sustainability. Next. One of our first projects then was to try and do working with students and with entrepreneurs on electric car sharing. Next. Including we built a solar powered electric car charging station where there you see the mayor and the Swedish ambassador, and the proud day we opened it in October 2016. Next. So there was that event. And next. So you can see the mayor's wearing the ZISPOA t-shirt. And there's an electric vehicle, which we had to borrow for the day, by the way. Next. I'm trying to go fast. Within the first year, we won sustainability awards. And that was what I was talking about earlier, that it really woke people's consciousness and got them excited. Next. And there's the award, bottom of the next. Yeah, there's the award. We also worked with the US government to some extent on something called GeoSummer, Geoinformation for Sustainable Urban Management and Resilience, which is a kind of a data-oriented activity. Next. Which led to this project about solarizing ZISPOA. Okay, next. I'm trying to go fast. Next. Another thing that we did under the renewable technology friendly thing on theme of zero waste was go back up one. I think you skipped. Anyway, we actually worked with the city to turn a recycling center that was underutilized into a community garden and composting center called Espacio Floresta. And that gave birth to a couple of businesses that work with households and with companies to promote composting of food waste. Next. 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 Okay. And that now we're still working on this theme. And next, so we had a big project, a Creathon, which is like a hackathon for people to come up with solutions for the city government, working with the city government on more sustainable ways of handling solid waste. Next. We had festivals like this World Environment Day Festival in 2016, the only event for UN World Environment Day in the whole state. Next. And now 4 years later on World Environment Week, there were dozens of events. So that's part of the impact that we had. Here you can see this event during the day with the solar tree, uniting technology and nature, this metal thing with solar panels that does all sorts of cool stuff. It looks like a tree. And of course the bikes. Next. Now there's solar trees in various locations in Porto Alegre. The promoting solar energy, next, one of our major focus points. We built on the university campus, a bunch of students raised the money for a solar post. So you can see the solar panel and the battery and the charging, where you can hang out in the courtyard, charge your phone, iPad, whatever, from 100% renewable energy. It was the first solar panel of this huge university with, that's one of the biggest ones in the country. Next. There you can see the award that the students won. Next. But actually, yeah, and here's the thing about that solar post, that became a new model for a new product. So that solar startup, Eligia, they invented the solar post, working with the students. Now there's more of them. We have one on our parklet, and we're working to green one of the major university buildings. And the university has embraced an agenda at the highest level to become a world leader in sustainable innovation. And all of that started with lots of students and some professors doing ZISPOA. Next. So we're trying to figure out, I'll go, I haven't finished solar yet, but stop, sorry. We're trying to figure out how to promote solar in the city, both for incentive from the city government, but we're also working on doing a privately organized solar electric cooperative that people can join, where we have the solar panels on some of the buildings, but people anywhere where they are using electricity can become members of it. Next, so then we have the bike friendly theme. Here we had an initiative called ZIS Talks, where we had talks every week by people, and that particular one was about the promoting more bike lanes and bike parking. And then we had a bike friendly festival where we closed a major street that buses usually run through on a Sunday all day with the cooperation of the city government. So all of the bike organizations, bike stores, bike services, everything could display their wares. Next. Including working with Sweden on what we call people posting on social media about smart, sustainable mobility. Next. And here we are at night at the festival. Next. We had, a lot of creative economy folks are involved in this movement. So, and then here's one more thing. We had the Swedish ambassador and the Minister of Education, who's the co-chair of the Green Party, came back, and we did what was called the Global Climate Challenge. They were in the lead, but there was about 50 bicyclists behind them. We did this bike tour of ZISPOA to raise awareness about climate change. Next. Another thing that we did was, I don't know if you don't have this in most places in the world, but we have this movement now that we helped launch called parklets, where you take out 2 to 3 car parking spaces from this street, the curbside of the street, and instead you have a parklet that's a public park where people can sit and eat and congregate. And so we said, let's have a sustainable parklet as a new model. Please keep going. This is the street where it's on. You can see on Tuesday mornings, they have a farmer's market there. Next. This was kind of the design. You can see it has this, the solar post. It has the bike parking, and there's a bike lane on that street. It's made all out of recycled materials, including a group that works with poor people to produce eco blocks, recycled concrete. It had this sort of green roof, and before the COVID-19, everybody shut down. It was super popular and being used all the time, including because it's a public park. It's open 24 hours. Next. So there's the actual parkland. You can see the sign saying, "Você está na zona de inovação sustentável de Porto Alegre." You are in the zone. And you can see the businesses are doing great because more people are hanging out there and buying stuff to eat and drink. Next. Another thing that we brought from around the world is green drinks. Some of you may know, wherever you are in the world, that once a month there are green drinks, which is a networking event for people that are sustainability activists and entrepreneurs. We brought that to Porto Alegre. So there you can see that was the last green drinks that we had, which opened the parklet. Next. We did conferences and seminars. There was an international seminar we did at the Federal University where I teach on participatory community transformation. And the keynote speaker was a professor from Brooklyn College, Michael Menzer, who's now leading the effort to try and organize a sustainable innovation zone in Brooklyn. Next. We also are part of the UN Habitat World Urban Campaign. GUD is one of the founders of that, and I'm on the steering committee. So we did 2 UN Habitat Urban Thinkers campuses. The first one was about ZISPOA, and then in November 2017, and then in December 2019, it was about sustainable innovation zones as the movement's growing. So we'll just go through these slides very quickly. Keep going, please. Next. So this was from these are a couple images from the first one. Next. And then keep going. And this is from the second one, and please keep going. Next. So that's from the second one. Next. And then lastly, as I mentioned, this movement's growing. Beginning in 2018, we got 2 more zones, one in Santo Angelo, where they changed the name a little bit. They called it the Creative and Sustainable Innovation Zone, called ZISON. Next. They just did an initiative, COVID-19, called ZIS Music, where on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7 Brazil time, they have performers perform, and you can watch it on Facebook and so forth. The other one is in Panama City, ACTA, that's doing a lot of amazing things. Next. So here you have the climate march that we played a key role in organizing here, both in 2015 and 2019, Save the Planet, in the park that's at the center of the zone. Next. And here's my wife, Nancy, who did all of this 100% together. So even though and she's sitting right here, she's not on camera, but none of it would have ever happened without Nancy. And so with all my heart, I'm speaking on behalf of both of us. Next. There you go. So now if I hope I went through this fast enough. So if there are a few more questions, we would love it if anybody wants to, you can go, we got 3 websites to go to learn more, globalurban.org, globalurban.net, which is specifically focused on the zones. And if you want to know more about ZISPOA, ZISPOA.info. But we would love it if people, and now you see my email address, if you want to do one in your city, we're in the process of doing a guidebook, how we did ZISPOA and all the lessons we learned from all the mistakes we made. but now we have others, people in places that have learned from us that are trying to do it. So we have a kind of a network that we hope will grow. So if you're interested in helping or contributing anyway, or most important, I think, in doing it in your city or community where you are, please let me know and we'll try and advise and encourage you as much we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. I have to say, your talk was very enlightening, but it also made me rather angry that we've known all these things for so long and we could have been doing them for like the whole of my life, literally.
A lot of wonderful information, though. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, the good news is we still have a decade. It's not too late to start doing it.
Well,
It's not too late.
We've got 8 years.
Yeah. But
It's on the right track, though.
Yeah.
But when we when I look at the, in other words, NOMA, which is a total transformation, took 2 decades. So suppose only been going for 4 years. At 4 years in NOMA, we hadn't even built the metro station yet. Although we had broken the ground for it, we got the money. By the way, it was the only metro station in the world where the private sector paid 1/3 of the cost of it voluntarily. But in any case, so if you look at SPOA and you say, oh, what's the impact on the ground? What have we accomplished? Not that much yet. But when you look at the political impact, how it's changed people's view about what's possible in the future, it's already huge. And so that's the reason. So to take small actions now that have a big impact in moving progress in the right way towards the future.
That's great. Speaking of politics, Angela, what are we doing about politics and Democrats abroad now?
Our next, actually, we're going to make a little transition. We have a video about, and it's actually called A Different Direction. And it's about moving into a different direction for our society and sustainable energy. So
could I ask you please to do me a favor? Could you, for everyone that's participating, could you send them the link to the video since they didn't get to see it? It's only 3 minutes, but I'd love for people to see it. Is that possible? To share the link?
Yes, actually, everything that people have shared, their slides, everything, we're going to put it up on a page where people can take a look at it. All the links and everything.
All right.
It'll be right
on the slide 57 actually has the link on it.
Oh,
so,
okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
That's a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for doing what you're doing today.
Thank you you've been hanging around all day, like all morning. I was really shocked to see you at the beginning of the morning.
Yeah, well, I wanted to hear about the Green New Deal that was sort of highlighted. So we had to get up at 6. So it wasn't on camera because we were actually still in bed.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's been, and there are lots of other Earth Day webinars that I know of that are happening today that got invited to. But you did a great job. This has been very inspiring, and to whatever extent it helps energize people in Democrats abroad, that would be great.
Yes, and
Hope so.
definitely everyone needs to vote. If you have not requested your absentee ballot and you're an overseas voter, please go to votefromabroad.org. It's very important. We cannot make any change. Oh, hi. Nice to meet you.
Okay.
Yes, we can't change anything as long as we have this current administration. That is 100% for sure.
Yes.
Hang on,
Yes.
everybody.
We need a different direction.
We need a different direction. Let us.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
Change it up now. It's time to move in a different direction. Don't care what they say, not gonna obey. It's time to move in a different you got. We're gonna run now, change this life now. It's time to move in a different direction. Don't care what they see, I'm gonna live free. It's time to move in a different direction. We're gonna rise now, not staying down, no. We're gonna move in a different direction. Take your beliefs and let them scream. Oh, let me hear you scream. It's time, so we gotta try. Take my hand, don't go too deep into it. Time has come, rise up and show me what you got. It's time to move in a different direction. It's time to move in a different direction. It's time to move in a different direction. Time to move in a different direction. Time to move in a different direction. Show me what you got. What you got. Show me what you got.
Okay. Let us rock on.